If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of them says to you, "Go in peace, keep warm, eat your fill," and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. Now, I'm sure you all know the expression, put your money where your mouth is. Right? I think we might just have James's version of it right here in today's reading. He's practically screaming off the page, get your priorities straight, people. He's telling us that our faith in Jesus calls us to tangible acts of caring and healing and justice, and of course, compassion. He's saying you got to do it here in the world that we live in, right here, right now. And it needs to be the kinds of works that meet all of the pressing needs of living beings with whom we share this wonderful creation that God has given us. And if anyone thinks otherwise, well, think again, James says, because this kind of lifeless faith doesn't count for much at all in James's eyes, the kind that doesn't do the real tangible stuff. I mean, it's kind of harsh, right? And that almost 2,000-year-old challenge to anyone who might be tempted to keep their faith all in the realm of the spiritual, or think maybe Christianity is just about some heavenly future, is pretty much the main point of the entire epistle. Have a living faith. Have it mean something in terms of addressing the needs of your neighbors with whom you share this world. And I have to say, it makes one wonder, what must have been going on around James to motivate him to write this one and only letter to the church? Now, current scholarship favors a date of as early as the mid-50s of the Common Era, so just, a couple decades after when we believe Jesus was put to death. It's long enough after Jesus' death that the gospel has in fact spread along many of the shipping and trade routes of the Eastern Mediterranean into what was these incredible cosmopolitan international cities that had this giant marketplace of ideas. I mean, we can imagine we have a lot of cities like that today too. Now, we can see something similar going on in Paul's writings, of which we have a lot and were probably written around the same time. He also talks about all these competing ideas about what the life of faith should look like. As Paul tells it, there's even those who disparage our entire physical existence as, hopelessly sinful, instead calling upon people to turn inward, seek secret knowledge of all of these otherworldly and mysterious things. Forget about the day-to-day. And, as we know from Paul, there's also lots of signs in his letters that people are acting like people. They get wrapped up in all of the struggles over who the spiritual superheroes might be, and in the meantime, all of the widows and orphans are not getting fed. I think it's safe to say that both Paul and James, though quite different in many ways, would both come down on the same side around the question of what the life of faith should look like. Faith in Jesus is something that changes our lives and it shapes our Christian communities. It does that in profound ways that play out in how we act towards each other and how we treat the entirety of creation, and that matters in the here and now. And In other words, faith in Jesus is something that you will know when you see it in action. Now, I don't think it's a secret to any of us that love your neighbor as yourself has implications for what people actually say and do. So it's no wonder that James's strongly worded challenge, well, it feels just as pointed and relevant to people of faith today as it did for those earliest Christians. And just imagine all of the things that James might call out if, he was to show up in our world here and now. Things that he'd say are not living the living faith, so to speak. I mean, look around us and you'd be like, favoritism? I think the practice of selling access to pews, that's finally died away. But privilege and entitlement is still a thing that we know that we wrestle with both inside and outside the church doors. And then there's partiality because, James talks about the courts in his days, but do our courts dispense equal justice no matter how much or how little we might have paid for our lawyer? I don't think so. And then there's all the deference to wealth and status in our society. I mean, do the expensively dressed who drive all the good cars get more welcome and more access and more authority than people who have worn clothes and, travel by the bus? I think we have to say yes if we are honest with ourselves. And even if we think about James's most basic measure, the one that asks, are people being adequately fed? Are they warm? Well, I think we have to say that we still have lots of work to do on that front. And just imagine if James looked around him today and he'd be like, oh my gosh, the impacts of climate change, I think I need to add some things to my list. Like, do people have access to clean water? Do they have a place to shelter from the heat? Or, the hurricanes and fires and all of that. So basically, if you call yourself a Christian, then walk the walk. That's what James is telling us. And he also is presenting it in a way that he wants us to know that's good news. That's the good news. Because it offers us a possibility of transformation and healing and reconciliation. It's a type of salvation that is available to everyone, no matter where you fit in the scheme of things. Because better care for all and better care for our creation, that's going to change things for everyone. But you know what else I think? It's not always a message that's easy for us to hear. I mean, especially if we consider that Christians, let's face it, we've been hearing it for coming up on 2,000 years now. I mean, can humanity ever really meet James's high standard of faith? And if not, should we keep beating ourselves, oops, sorry, that was sound effect there, beating our breasts, as we do, over how far we fall short of this? Or, should we maybe lower our standards a little? Now, I invited us to consider last week that James could very well have been Jesus's younger brother. It's very much a part of the tradition of this epistle, and opinions differ on this, but there are many scholars, especially in current scholarship, who are coming to think, it really could have been the case. So I thought we'd think about this epistle today from the perspective of what if he really was Jesus's younger brother. Because then it's possible that James had to grow up in the shadow of a brother who asked and expected the best of everyone around him. I mean, just imagine you're, 9, 10, 11, possibly even 13. And your older brothers will always walking around saying, acknowledge your failings, turn your life around, draw yourself closer to God, and care for one another. I'm sure James, he got tired of it sometimes. I mean, can you hear the kid? Why, Mom? Why is Jesus always the perfect brother? I'm pretty sure that Mary and Joseph needed some ace parenting skills to assure all of their children that they were each loved for exactly who they are. And I do get the sense from James's letter that he really admired his older brother too. I mean, why else would he still be defending his teachings as a middle-aged man? Still, imagine James's delight when even Jesus's inner circle of disciples needed continual reteaching and correcting. The great thing that we can see from the Gospels is Jesus met everyone exactly where they are. Jesus shows patience for all of the ups and downs of their own personal journeys of faith. And if you think about it, isn't that what goes on in a family? I mean, they see us at our best, and they definitely see us at our worst. So, and I'm sure James had plenty of that on display, both best and worst, when he was a kid. So then, as I played this out in my head, I then found myself asking, what if James was there in that house with Jesus in that foreign country of Tyre on the day that we hear described in our gospel reading from Mark? Maybe he heard this Syro-Phoenician woman. She's foreign. I mean, she probably looks and dresses strangely in James's eyes, but he was there to hear her challenging Jesus. She insists that what Jesus has been teaching means that his saving acts are for all people, not just his people, but for people like her too. You can hear it. Don't play favorites, Jesus. Heal my daughter too. Now, I'm told this is a huge pivot point in Mark's gospel. It's a point where Jesus' ministry literally starts to, I can say this again, How's that? Jesus' ministry starts to open up to Gentiles from that point forward in Mark's gospel. So it seems like, at least as Mark likes to tell it, even Jesus had some growing and learning to do in order to live into the full implications of who he is and what he's here to do. So, what do you think? Does that woman's voice and the way that Jesus then turned and embraced the challenge that she placed before him, does that echo in James's head? He is writing today's passage that we heard from his epistle? I like to think so. I mean, you can hear it. That's true faith. In James, he's saying that the ability to say, you're right, there's still more need for healing and reconciliation and love and justice, and we can still do better. That's what faith looks like. So, here we are today. And we are celebrating 14 years of good and faithful works on the part of our Pips Pantry. Today we get to celebrate how the founders of this ministry heard the needs. And they thought, we can do more to address food insecurity right here in our own neighborhood, right here out of the building of this church. And today we get to celebrate how that ministry, this ministry of ours, has grown. It's grown from this small, scrappy, creative ministry into an operation that has developed broad partnerships with the food bank and with volunteers from across our wider community. You can hear the conversations that must have been happening. There's still hungry people, and so there's more that you thought could be done. And so you sought extra help. And we celebrate how y'all figured out what you could do even when everything got shut down by COVID. You knew that even more people were going to be hungry because so many people were out of work at that point. So there had to be a way to do it. And we celebrate how you advocated with Second Harvest to figure out the way that they could continue to offer all those great fresh fruits and vegetables after the end of the COVID emergency funding. Because, you knew it's better for the people that you serve, and, who wants to just hand out processed snack food when you've been able to give out fresh fruits and vegetables for a couple of years, right? It's so much better for people, it's also better for our planet. So there has to be a way. And I definitely sat in my office and listened to Jane having that argument with the people at the food bank on more than one occasion. So thank you for that. Today, we get to celebrate the living, breathing faith of everyone who has been a part of our PIPS pantry food distribution ministry. We celebrate the courage, the humility, and the strength to keep asking, is there more that we are being called to do here? And then, I figured out how to do it. So it's true, James holds us to a high standard for our faith in Jesus. It's a standard that Jesus himself both articulated and modeled for us. But if James knew Jesus as I imagine only a brother can, then he of all people understands that we all grow into our callings in life and that faith is a journey. So, I think the invitation that we receive today is to keep listening to the needs of all types of people with compassion and imagination and definitely without favoritism. And then be open to what more Jesus may be inviting you to do. And have faith that Jesus is going to be with you through it all. I think that's the most and the best that we can do. That's what a living, growing faith looks like. So may we all continue on this journey.